Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining our Open Envoy fireside chat. We have Open Envoy CEO Matthew Tillman and 3GTMS co-founder JP Wiggins here to discuss the digital transformation of logistics and software management. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Tillman, CEO of Open Envoy.
Thanks so much, and thank you for joining me, JP. I was going to say, I actually want to just do another intro on JP. Most people don't know this. JP's an absolute legend in the TMS space. I'm just going to say you invented the category. I'm just going to throw it out there. And then everybody else is just kind of following in your footsteps.
Old as dirt, let's just say that, so.
But thrilled to have you, man. And I really appreciate your time today. When you started in the TMS space, when was that? Like late 90s?
I was actually a user of TMS software, like the first versions of it. I was a traffic manager. That's how old I was. I was a traffic manager at a catalog retail company. And what my job was is to route trucks from the distribution centers to the stores. So it was a lot of multi-stop LTL modal decisions. And we brought in a person who became my best friend and co-founder of a lot of companies, Mitch Wesley. And, I started using his software then. So that was, let's say 87.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. On an old PC, like an IBM 386 or whatever they were back then. I even forget the names. So
I love it. We obviously I built a TMS in the past, an ocean freight TMS, which shall not be named today. But I'm familiar with what it takes to do that today. What did it take to do that back then to create that category, and what were the pain points the same for those types of customers?
It is really apples and oranges, even though, the basic decisions with TMSs really haven't changed. You're moving freight from some location to another location, and it's a very complex, it still is a little bit of an art form. Like that routing function that I did way back then manually. I manually had like little slots where all my stores were. When orders would come down, I'd put them in these pigeonholes. And then I would put all my pigeonhole paper together and try to literally look at a map and build a truck stop. And then, oh, this doesn't fit. Well, let's ship this LTL, or this one doesn't fit. Oh, this is parcel. No, and let's try to build that multi-stop truck. And then you go to the carriers and figure out what carriers are going to haul it. So the challenge back then, in many ways, it was a heck of a lot easier to write a TMS. I mean, our first TMS was myself and Mitch Wesley, and literally it was in his apartment in Manhattan using a 4PL language software on old PCs, and 1.5 people, writing code could actually come out with a TMS then in a couple of weeks. Versus now, a modern tier 1 TMS. Ooh, there's a lot going on there. Yeah, sure, you can do some of those light functions that we talked about, but there's so many complexities now and so many nuances that, I got here. It's like we got 50 R&D folks dedicated in R&D side, and we've been working 8 years and 50 some $1 million of R&D work into this just TMS, and so it's a lot more going on. But the challenges are still the same. You want your end users. It's got to be simple. You can't have complex software. You're simple. People want simple, but they're trying to solve more complex problems by being simple. Does that make sense?
And what the definition, I think, of a TMS has changed over time as well, right? Because I think in the early days, you're right. It's point A to point B. You're usually managing truckloads, things of that nature. When we got into it, it was on the ocean freight side, which is eventually what led me to Open Envoy, of course. But when you think about a TMS today, I see hundreds of freight forwarders saying that they provide a TMS. I see, kind of everybody has a TMS. Right?
I kind of box these things, and their boxes are still a little fuzzy, but there's like parcel TMSs. There's international TMSs, there's freight forwarder type TMSs, international, maybe that's the same kind of category. There's fleet TMSs, things that are managing the assets. So asset management for fleet. Carrier TMSs would kind of fall into that category. So if I'm an owner of a fleet, I'm looking for TMS to manage my fleet, manage my drivers, do my dispatch. Then there's a couple nuances. The space that I play in and fit the most, what we call, I'm going to use Gardner's definition here, is they call it holistic, multimodal, non-asset based domestic TMS. So I know it's
That's
a
a
mouthful,
mouthful.
but that really
Yeah.
does describe what we're talking about here. So this is people, they're primarily worried about moving your domestic freight. Doesn't mean you can't also include international, but it's primarily looking at that modal decision. Do I go parcel? Do I go LTL? Do I go truckload? Do I manage my third-party carriers? Doesn't mean you can't also manage fleet with your TMS. So it's just, everything gets real fuzzy there, but that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking TMS, is that domestic multimodal, where you're doing mode decisions, you're managing your third-party carriers and vendors, you're managing, moving that freight around and then paying all those bills. Or if you're a 3PL, then you got to figure out what your upcharges and management fees are to bill your customer. So paying freight bills, buy, sell, buy rate, sell, stuff like that, manage your margins. So there's a whole other complexity related to, and that's actually another category. It almost would be like brokerage or 3PL TMS. So.
Yeah. And when you think about, the space has obviously evolved considerably. There's a lot of manual effort going into it in the past. How much of that work has been automated by firms like 3G TMS?
Well, what we actually do is we automate the complexities and automate the manual tasks. So back to the example, when I was the route planner, I literally would have to go calculate my own rates. I'd have to figure out, well, how much is it going to cost to move from here to here? What type of carrier should I use? And so then you would do all that work manually. What the computer now does is it does a lot of that complexity. So it will find the best rates. It'll rate shop all the carriers. It'll using your own rates. So it's using your rates to make the best decisions. But also more importantly, is it's a constraint-based system. So it's not suggesting things that are illegal. Don't have a driver run at 85 miles an hour. Don't have a driver run more than 10 hours at a time without an 8-hour stop. Don't miss an appointment. You got to make sure you hit your appointments at your customer sites. You got to make sure that this carrier can only handle 3 loads today and 6 loads tomorrow. There could be, capacity constraints that there could be constraints that, hey, I can't have more than 3 stop-offs on my load, or I've guaranteed this carrier 6 loads, a week, so you got all kinds of these constraints coming at you. That's what the computer can do, is follow those constraints and follow those math rules and follow and then give you results that meet all that. And then that's where the art of route planning still comes in. And this is, you still need route planners, because the route planner then knows, well, hey, there might be more customer freight coming down tomorrow. Oh, I know this is going to the Southwest. Oh, I know I have a big order for Home Depot that comes in on Thursdays. So let me hold these loads for a few more hours until those orders drop. Things that, that a computer just can't anticipate just right now, because the computers don't know the customer base, or they can't anticipate sometimes. They can get smart. They're getting damn smart. And, with AI and tools and stuff like that, we're making these things smart. But still, I like to think of route planning as an art form still. So.
It's interesting you mentioned the art form. So my previous company, what we did was we helped shippers, like you were saying, go from point A to point B, but usually with an ocean move in the middle. And you mentioned payments a little bit earlier being one of the problems. One of the things that we noticed was almost none of those customers were actually figuring out if they were paying the right amount, which is actually why we created Open Envoy. So Open Envoy, for everybody on the phone, very specifically does one thing. We match the invoice you receive from whoever your vendor is. In this particular context of this conversation, it's about freight and logistics. We match that invoice directly with the underlying rate, the contract code. And so, JP, what you were mentioning, we do connect to rate management systems, and have to, because of how complex rates are in this particular industry. The decision on what rate was supposed to have been paid needs to be made by that rate management tool. And you guys actually have and sell a rate management solution as well.
Yeah, well, actually, it's core to allowing the computer to do the logistics functions that we talked about. You got to understand what's your cost associated with those moves, costs associated with the moves that you actually execute, but more also as important is what are all your options. So it has to rate all the possible legal options, and options based on carrier selections, customer preferences, things like that. And then, to find the best alternative, that's the optimized, which, but once you execute though, we already know what the rate should be. I mean, we know how much this thing is going to cost. So when the freight bills do come in, we match them up and then pass them through an auditing process. So, hey, as long as they're within a certain percentage point, or, maybe $5 or something like that, automatically approve them for payment. All right. Yeah. So that's core to having a rate engine, because without a rate engine, I can't do my optimization. I can't figure out the best modes. I can't figure out the best way to ship this freight without, a core rating engine that has the exact rates, not just a partial rate or a sample rate, but the best rates. It has to be the real rates, the rates you're actually going to get charged. And yeah, we calculate rates ourselves. We use tariffs. We go through the whole SMC3 process, get the tariffs for LTL, or we use carrier APIs, or we use third-party rating engines for other modes. All right. Truckload, we usually have to calculate ourselves. You put in your rate tariffs and whatnot in the system, and then the system comes back. Parcel, we're a full parcel system too. So, you got to hit the parcel APIs and get your rates back. So yeah, rates are, central to a TMS.
And when you talk about sourcing rates, because some TMSs actually go out and source their own rates on behalf of the customer as well, is that a practice that you perform as well?
We've looked at doing that, and we can do that. The thing is we sell a lot to the 3PL industry, and if I actually did that legally, I have to become a 3PL. All right. So I have to get my brokerage license, and that kind of puts me in a competitive situation with my customers. So it's a touchy one. I can't really do that right now, but I'm also, I do have relationships where, like, let's say I have some shippers that want to come on board. Trust me, I can find them some very favorable rates through my customer base. I just got to be agnostic because I can't step myself into a competitive situation with my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the issues that we had with the last companies that we basically just shut that down entirely. And that way we could sell more into a larger TAM, into a larger market.
It's a great topic to figure one out. And, I could definitely get the shipper clients that come on board with this through my network. I have some great 3PLs. I've got some of the largest. I got billions of dollars of freight that flow through my system. My biggest customer is the Department of Defense. The LT, and it's all LTL for them. So it's like, that's a lot of freight we're working through. We've got the volume, we can get them good rates. It's just that I can't do it. I don't want to become, it's part of my methodology. Maybe we got to change this. It's my strategy. It's my strategy is I don't want to compete against my customers, and setting up the 3G rate tariff would compete against my broker 3PL customers.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that you remain agnostic in that way. And when you look at this space generally, right, all the CFOs in the space are thinking about digital transformation. They're all thinking about, like, how can they automate more of their workflow? Logistics departments want to automate more of their workflow because cost of labor is just going to go up and up and up, and they just can't really afford to service every aspect of logistics using people anymore. So that's when algorithms like yours come in. That's when TMSs like yours come in. How are they thinking about digital transformation in some of your customers?
Well, COVID really underlined, it really exposed a sore point happening with many companies. So many customers that we talk to now are prospects. They've, let's say over the past decade, digitized everything else within the four walls of their company. And they've done a good job of it. They've put in ERP systems, financial systems, warehouse systems, S&OP, you name it, they've got it. But once that freight leaves the four walls of their organization, it gets lost. It really is. They hand it over to some third-party vendor, done, it's gone. Even if they're using a 3PL, it gets lost half the time. So digitizing of transportation function itself, I think that's what's going on. How many people lost freight this COVID season? It's exposing a glaring hole that if you don't have that ability to control and monitor your stuff while it's in transit, you don't know what's going on. You're losing touch. And COVID exposed, because we had capacity shortages all across the board, and we're still experiencing them right now. Parcel, we're at capacity, and they're not adding capacity. The same with LTL. They're at capacity. They're not adding capacity. You turn your freight over to these folks. Hey, it may get there. It may not. It may be a week. It may go on time. It may not. That's what's happening right now. But a lot of companies don't have that digitized. They don't have that type of visibility or command and control plugged in. And it's more than just going and buying a visibility tool. The visibility tool will tell you what your freight is in transit, but this is something else most people forget. You have to tell the visibility tool what your shipments are for it to track. All right. And that's a gap that most people, that's what a TMS does. We take orders, turn them into shipments. Shipments then get turned over to carriers. Carriers then can be tracked. All right. But if you have orders from an ERP, you can't just track orders. You have to turn them into, well, what did you tender to the carrier? And you need that information to turn it over to a visibility tool. That's what a TMS does, is it can be that piece of the puzzle there to plug in that, to actually truly digitize your freight. And that's why I tell people to really look at a TMS, either your TMS, buy a TMS, or maybe a TMS through your 3PL.
So when you think about the TMS, for you, it's the middle component before the ERP. And certainly you've sold into ERPs in the past. Obviously, a couple of your companies have been purchased by major ERP vendors. When you think about those sales cycles for a TMS and making sure the customer is getting enough value out of their purchase. What are some of the low-hanging fruit pieces that you try to communicate very early on? Is it that, shipment creation function? Is it the routing function? Like, what is the big pain point for them to be able to adopt the software and get value as quickly as possible?
Obviously visibility and tracking, command control towers type of functionality is the hot topic right now because of what we just talked on COVID. But there's still that you put in a modern TMS. If you're like a manufacturer building products, food and beverage, if you're shipping actual truckload and LTL freight, and you can make modal decisions, those people instantly save 10 to 15% of freight just by doing it better with a modern TMS. So, that's a huge chunk of change there. So, most people spend 10 to 15% of their revenue on freight. So, you're a $100 million company, you're going to spend $10 million of freight. We're going to save you 10% of that. I mean, that's $1 million right there per year. All right. Maybe more if you're like building products or you're shipping heavier. You might save $1.5 million a year for a system that's going to cost you a lot less than that. I mean, that's the other thing is the cost of the technology is just going, we can do this stuff so much cheaper now. So,
yeah.
But that's it. Cost.
That changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about the integration costs on these sorts of things, so one of the big things for us is we want to be integrated with the customer live within a month.
Right.
We want to be like completely done, wrapped up with integration within a month so that we can show that they can pay back the entire cost of our product within 90 days. That's really important to us as it's a fundamental focus for us as a business. Right. When you think about the TMS space, obviously, usually a little bit longer deployment cycles because they're intercepting so much trade. How do you think about the average in the industry, and then where do you try to fit in that? And kind of how have you been able to build and research a product in order to reduce that timeline?
The big one is right now we've made integration so much simpler, the modern TMS vendors, that the integration is no longer the long pole in the implementation project. You could bring a full function TMS up online now in 2 months. I mean, that's a fairly normal size. The ERP integration, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I've got a piece of middleware, for example, that has template integration to ERPs to, almost all of them, Oracle, SAP, Infor, Flex, IFS, Sage X3 and the Dynamics suites, and then also the same with like your accounting packages with Great Plains, the same with your warehouse management package. I've got those templates already there. So when I go set them up, I mean, literally the integrations are done in a matter of a couple of hours of work to set that up. But then by doing it this way, we give flexibility to the project team to determine their own business flow. Then on the other side of it, the carrier network that we bring to the table. So if you're using our bank of any carrier that's in our network, well, then it's literally just turning them on. Yeah. So then you just start using that carrier network. Truckload carriers are usually setting up with a little more, you're going to have some kind of automated email structure and carrier portals to communicate with them. Or if they are sophisticated with an API and EDI connectivity, we can use that. If they have it, we've already using it. So, but my point is you got that carrier network turned on. So the connectivity integration doesn't become the long pole anymore in a TMS implementation. What becomes the long pole is, digging out all your contracts and figuring out how to digitize them. And if it's API, that's great. We'll turn them on by just get your passcodes and, but then you got to talk to the carrier and say, hey, what's your logins and stuff like that. So, there's some work involved, but, and then figuring out your business flow, because you don't just slap in a TMS because you're probably doing some things really wrong. And we don't want to automate bad processes. So you use it as a standpoint to automate and to maybe come up with better processes so that, do I stage this freight a little more? How do I stage it on the warehouse floor? Am I able to hold orders for a day or two? And then the big thing that we have to think about is we try to get more flexibility. Like you give us a delivery date. Well, then we ask you questions. Can we deliver early? Are we allowed to deliver early? What if we deliver 2 days early? That allows us to consolidate freight with other customers. And then you might say, well, like Home Depot lets us deliver early, but Lowe's, we got to deliver on time and we have to call for appointments on both and things like that. So there's a lot of little details that have to be worked out, but literally you can work these TMSs in 2 months now. And really be fully functional. And then with that 10% ROI that we just talked about, I mean, you're saving a lot of money. A $10 million is a small shipper in reality in many ways. I mean, that's only, you're literally, but that's the size, the SMB market. That's what we said at SAP when I was there. We called small, medium-sized business. And that was, people in the 100 million, 200, 500 million range. But definitely any shipper really I think can really benefit from even a slice of the TMS. Maybe they don't need the whole thing, but that's the advantage of cloud solutions right now is maybe you only need a rating engine up front to do mode selection for you. Well, then have your NetSuite ping the dang thing and give you the mode and carrier selection back in the planning process, even before you drop it to the warehouse. Maybe that's a great thing to do there is just maybe have it try to find consolidations. We have a few of our clients that operate like that, where their SAP systems or NetSuites or whatever, they just ping us, send us all a bunch of orders that haven't been shipped. And we try to find the ones that can be consolidated together based on a lot of sophisticated rules and then send them back consolidated shipments. So you're not sending 3 or 4 different shipments a day to some of your customers. So, that's like I said, this stuff is easy now. It's all cloud-based. It's so much simpler now. I mean, literally when we started Glog and it's Oracle Transportation Management back in the 90s, 2000, we fired it up. You're looking at a year, 18 months to implement those things. And that's what it was. That's 20 some years ago now. I mean, we're 20 years plus. And
we still see TMSs all the time. We still see TMSs all the time.
Still see them out there. Yeah. I mean, these things just slap in. They really are. They provide great value. You buy them as a SaaS software. So if they don't work, you're not paying for them. Usually you pay by the transaction. So if you're not using them, you're not paying for it. And then you walk away from it if you don't want to use it anymore. And since the implementation costs aren't a major investment, heck, it's so much simpler now. It is. It's easier to sell. It's easier to install. It's easier to prove value. It's just the world has changed,
And you from a value proof point perspective, this is one thing that's always tricky about the freight space is you're valuing it based on the amount of freight savings that they're going to realize by using a better operational workflow, or are you also valuing it on other axes as well?
Well, like the big one is you're going to have those soft dollars like the visibility, command, and control that we talked about. Customer service value is important there. And then also there can be some savings from if you up into the planning process or even the quoting stage, your CSRs. So when you're quoting things to customers, getting customers to buy and optimal freight quantities, maybe you're giving them discounts up front to buy in, either, full pallet or multi-pallet or full truckload type of quantities. You can back that up. So you'll get some savings there. And then of course, the true hard savings come from just rate shopping, finding the best carrier for individual loads, but then also the modal shift. And if you're in the ability to do multi-stop or pool distribution, just those huge mode shifts there, those have massive savings. We're talking 20-some%. If you're able to instead of shipping a bunch of LTLs across the country, put them in one truck, drive that one truck across the country, drop it at a distribution center over there, and then let them do the delivery. That's pool distribution. Those people save. Well, it's faster. You get less handling. So then if you're building products, less handling is very important. You have less damages on your freight. It's faster and it's significantly cheaper. You'll save 20, 30, sometimes 40% on moves that way versus giving a long haul LTL carrier. And we just mentioned that those LTL carriers are capacity right now. So, you got to look at doing different things. And that's another savings. So this stuff is wonky. Rates are getting dynamic from these carriers right now. Carriers are changing their rates on you all the flipping time. And so you have to respond dynamically. So the solution you did today may not be the solution you do, the next time you make that run.
That's right. I mean, we have one customer, they do maybe 2,500 invoices a month. So it's not a massive freight bill. And they get ocean rate freight changes once a week. So they get the amendments once a week. And it's from every single one of their carriers. So they have to update the rate management system. And then that has a direct impact, obviously, on the way they're getting invoiced from the carriers. The carriers also do another tricky thing where they invoice our customer. They also invoice the TMS and they invoice the 3PL that was involved. And maybe they get paid 3 ways. And so it became a very important function for us to be able to dedupe across multiple providers, which is really tricky. So when you think about that, you think about the collaborative nature of logistics generally. What sort of tools and what investments have your larger customers wanted you to provide, or what kind of tools do they want you to provide in terms of collaboration? Because it's becoming more and more important for these, sort of multi-supplier, multi-vendor systems.
That's a great question. In many ways, I kind of find myself as an enablement platform for other logistics providers.
Yeah.
So other logistics tech or log tech I use. I don't know, is that a term, log tech? Do you use that or ever heard of it?
Sometimes. I try. I don't, but it works well with you. I think it works well.
Yeah, but let's just say tracking tools, visibility tools. That's the perfect one. I mean, that's a very common one right now. Also, document management tools. So if you're dealing with paperwork, you want to bring in a DMS to help do OCR, character recognition, even on the PDF email. Like if the carrier sending an invoice over a PDF email, turn that into something that the computer can read for that auditing process I just talked about. So your PUD happens that way. DMSs are big. Then a lot of other smaller things that we run into. So mileage-based systems, calculating the distances for truckloads, whatever's in your contract, Rand McNally, ALK, PC Miler, Household Good Miles, things like that. So those are another tool set that we also have to integrate into a lot of times. If you're a broker or you're doing brokerage functions, a lot of shippers are doing brokerage now, load board type of integrations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So being able to post loads to the load boards and see what the loads are going out there, the DAT stuff. Carrier onboarding is another big one. Never ship a piece of freight without full insurance. Right. You put your company out of business if there's a problem by doing that. So, if you're finding brand new carriers out there, you need to make sure they're properly onboarded, which means verifying insurance. So we got tools that do that. So that's another big one right there. So there's a lot of tools that carrier onboarding right there. You can even go down there's even some more, obviously like SMC3 I talked about. So if you're using SMC3 rating for your carrier freight bureaus, that's another, tools like that there too. So, of course, mapping is other big, mapping tools, document management tools, printing and bills of lading, document mappings, and all that other good stuff. So claims management is another enablement there too.
Yeah,
so
document management is probably our single biggest inbound right now. Customers that just want us to extract the data from the documents.
Yep.
And that's because I think historically the shipping industry has had such bad tech when it comes to document management, when it comes to document extraction. I think there's been no real proper R&D investment, honestly, in that. It's been mostly human-based. And I think it's something that TMS vendors, it frustrates you guys as well, right? Because you basically need to outsource someone. You're a technology company.
Yeah.
You need to outsource it to somebody to actually extract those documents, right? You can't just have thousands of people on staff. So that's probably the single biggest inbound that we have at Open Envoy is for customers looking to extract data from existing documents.
Great. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Okay. With that, I think we've got time for a couple of questions, if there are any. Natalie can tell us. And we got one earlier, which is, different levels of customer support. So one thing we don't do as a company, we don't really have professional services. We basically just assign a customer success rep and work directly with the customer, which is a little bit less common in the space. And then I'd love to hear, what does 3G DMS offer in terms of support tiers?
We really don't change. We realize that all of our customers that use our software, it's mission critical operational software, so that all of our customers are on the same level of support. We have, of course, level 1, level 2, level 3 support. We do ticketing systems like a lot of folks do using Zendesk. But all of our stuff is, we have the tier of the problem. Like, is it a mission critical? Is it a showstopper? And an uptime kind of thing. But I just kind of tell people this, we're literally moving the Army and the Navy and the Department of Defense stuff around, and they're pretty tight on security and making sure this stuff is, almost, is up. So the uptime is insane and the redundancy is insane and the support is great. And we have to give that same level of support to all of our customers.
Yeah, we actually publish our uptime publicly, which made me very nervous initially, especially for an early stage company, because you iterate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it actually looks really good. So I was personally a little bit timid about that, but it's great to see it publicly. And we're starting to see that publicly more from other vendors in the space as well, which I think is a great thing, just to be.
It's all cloud-based. We have redundant servers everywhere. I mean, if our software is not running, this is fun. It's like in the industry, when we first opened 8 years ago, people were saying, well, what happens if the internet goes down and I can't run your software? And then COVID hits and it's like, well, what happens when you can't go in the office to run your on-prem software? So, and we're like literally telling this, but I mean, you follow modern release cycle. We do sandboxes and limited releases and stuff like that. So the things that are in our multi-tenant SaaS, when it goes into production, it just doesn't go down. It just hasn't. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't.
Yeah. Rolling deployments is incredibly important for customers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
And I think the final question, I guess, one last question I have for you, and because we're out of time, is just for 3G TMS, when you look at the competitive landscape in the market, you look at the growth opportunity, what is the one focus? What is your one singular focus as an organization right now? What do you want to see? Because last year was parcel. You did a great job in bringing on a parcel company. What does next year look like?
It's expanding multifold. There's a lot of different ones, but obviously we're finishing up our brokerage. We're putting tons and tons of software and R&D into our brokerage, but also trying to simplify that mid shipper a little bit more. I mean, we solve it for the large enterprise shipper. We're dead strong on. We're a great solution there, but like we're just trying to bring it down a little bit more and more, so that somebody that does have maybe $10 million of freight spend, that we're a perfect fit for them. But they can just buy a template from us and be running. So I mean that's really our approach. Is simplify from the mid-sized shipper and down, and then and actually it's actually a little more complex brokerage. So that complex broker that's trying to do managed transportation and brokerage and expand their 3PL business line. So it's a little bit of both. Let's add more complexity, but simplify.
That's great. JP, thank you so much for doing this today. It's always great talking to you. I learned so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thanks everyone for joining as well. And Natalie will take us out.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and week, and happy spring.